All
Uh,
right.
yes,
Good
Dr.
evening,
Sahib, if you
everyone.
could, yes, get us started.
Yep, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time. This is the Volunteers Orientation. This is our second session. And like I mentioned before, we're very honored to have Jamaica and Shawn, the best team that we could ever find for us to really help us, especially a lot of us is our first time getting involved with activism, civic engagement. I mean, they are the co-founders of all of us. Jamaica is the executive director. The position means nothing without the work. They have, I mean, I can't even introduce you guys in a way and not feel like we're leaving a lot of things out. So I purposefully want for you guys to give us a little background, right? We're not gonna have enough time, really just to tell us about what you guys have been doing, and then take it from there. We're all yours, guys.
Absolutely, and really happy to be here in this space to give an intro to movement work, which could be intro 101, 201, 301. There's a lot of introduction, but I'm happy to let Shawn to introduce himself and kick us off and talk about who we are.
Yeah, no problem. Could you stop sharing screen for a second just so we can get back to the scene, to the space, and then I'll have no problem introducing myself to this wonderful group. Um, so everyone, my name is Shawn Young, the co-founder of All of Us Community Action Group. I'm also the project lead for a wonderful program at a Bard College called the Bard Prison Initiative. I've been doing this work for a number of years in the capital region with Jamaica. Almost everything I've learned about this work, I've learned from Jamaica. She's an amazing activist and advocate in our community, has got a lot of things done on both the state and local level. There is, I don't think anyone else in the capital region that has put in the level of work and commitment over the number of years that I've known her, and even beyond that. So much appreciative to be here and to meet you all. I'm really excited that you're interested in how to organize in your community, what it takes to actually get change that your community wants and deserves. And I think that this is a great starting point for that. So thank you for joining, and I'm really excited about the conversation.
And so I am gonna put the screen back up. Happy to be here. My name is Jamaica Miles, co-founder, executive director. Those who know me know how I feel about titles because we are untitled and free. That is how you can actually find us on all social media platforms, because all of us should be untitled and free and valued for who we are as individuals and not the titles that we carry. Um, all of Us was founded in February of 2020. This small snapshot, to in which we see some familiar faces, is just really a small sample of what it looks like to do movement work every single day. It's not just protests and rallies, and we're going to get into that. But All of Us is in the community every single day, and we are a Black-led organization that believes in investing in communities, lifting up the voices of marginalized folks, and creating systemic and institutional change. There is a much longer version of what it means to be all of us, but because I want to make sure, and we want to make sure that we have enough time to speak with all of you and answer any questions you have, um, Shawn, is there anything else worth lifting up about who all of us is?
No, I think you covered it, and then through this conversation, they'll learn more about us as we go.
Absolutely. Um, well, love that this slide actually does not read the way it does on our screen. So what it says is that true leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. And we have this quote from Frederick Douglass that I think is really important when we're talking about creating change and doing movement work. If there is no struggle, there can be no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet who depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed on them. And these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. With that, Shawn's going to take us directly into 6 steps of organizing. So as you're wearing that really heavy statement from Frederick Douglass, let's talk about what it means to actually do movement work.
Yes, thank you, Jamaica. So these 6 steps are steps that I've learned in Selma, Alabama, working with a group of individuals that follow Dr. King. And it's the 6 steps in Kingian nonviolence. It's an approach that for us, it's a structure that we were already kind of committed to, but having these steps down were really important to kind of have a scaffolding or a foundation for our work. So step one in anything is information gathering, right? It's important for you, whatever the issue is, whether it's you're fighting something as brutal as police brutality, or you're looking to address some other inequities in your community. It's important for you to gather as much information as possible in doing that. The other, and there's a level of commitment in that as well. So it's not just good enough to complain and to see something that you believe is wrong. You have to find out why it's happening, get as much information as you possible, and then move into educating yourself about the different approaches and ways in which it can be addressed. Personal commitment. Now, it's in step 3, but personal commitment is something that goes throughout whatever you do. You have to recognize what your capacity is and check how committed you are to doing this work. It's not convenient. Okay, I want to be clear about that. A lot of what we do isn't convenient to our day-to-day lives. It's about the larger push for justice, and we understand the impacts of what we do will impact our families and our communities and all of that. And it's a good thing that we do it, but it's not easy work all the time. There is some joy in it, knowing that you're having an impact and you're making change happen. But you need to always evaluate your personal commitment, because when it gets difficult, if you just get involved with something without really really recognize what your personal commitment is, as soon as any wind blows in the wrong direction, you're gone. As soon as it becomes too difficult, you're not really attached to what anchors you to it. You'll be easily blown away from the work that you thought that you wanted to be a part of. So check your personal commitment, which is the big why for you. Why does this matter and why am I involved? That's really important, and I think it goes throughout. Now, negotiation is the approach, right? So it's the conversation. It's I see this thing wrong. I've gathered all the information about it. I've educated myself about, the different approaches of how to do this, and I want to have this conversation. Now, that conversation is with whatever the entity is that controls that. For instance, if we're talking about, say, speeding on Becker Street, right? And we want speed humps, or speed bumps, or speed humps, or we want signs, or we want whatever. We need to know who the person is that we can talk to about that. And for us, that's either going to directly to the city, talking with city council, talking with the mayor's office, finding out what data exists on speeding and accidents in our area, and then having that approach. That's the conversation, right? That's the conversation. And then when or if those folks are unwilling, that's when we show up in numbers. That's when you bring more and more of your community out. You find those of like mind and like concern and like interest and personal commitment, and you come together and you push that change directly at the people that can make that change happen for you. And like I said, in that example of speeding on Becker Street, that's showing up at City Council, that's producing the data, that's having the conversation and bringing folks out to make sure that they really understand that this is a community issue, not just something I'm personally invested in, right? You want your community there in direct action. And after that, it's the point of reconciliation. It's the point of, how is this thing beneficial for our entire community? How is it beneficial for all of us, right? How is it something that, how can it be explained to not just the community that came out and rallied and tried to make it happen, but to the folks that you're pushing it to make change happen for you? How is this a win-win? And then we recycle this thing back and forth. We do it again. Now, this is a very broad stroke kind of approach, but I believe it's the guardrails that you need in the first steps of any kind of organizing in your community.
And we're going to give a bit of a deeper dive when it comes to communicating with your community, as well as what does direct action look like, because those are some things that folks tend to think about. Before we get into direct action and different ways to do community outreach, there's going to be a broad strokes look about the cycles of movement work. And I say that very intentionally because it is not possible for us to go through the entire timelines that I'm going to present to you, but to give you just this overall picture of what it looks like, because there are cycles of movement work. 2020 was very much a heightened state where folks were in the streets and was very in your face. The movement still continues, even though right now we're not in the streets. And some of what that looks like we've seen historically, both here in the United States as well as globally. This is a broad strokes view of the civil rights timeline. What you'll see all the way to the left is that even before the 1960s, which is when folks typically talk about and think about the civil rights, they're like, oh, the Civil Rights Act 1964. There was a whole bunch of stuff that happened before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. There were massive movements happening simultaneously with different groups of individuals. And what we see is that while we won the Civil Rights Act, that there was backlash. The Mulford Act of 1967 and Gun Control Act of 1968 was in direct opposition to the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, who was actively standing outside with guns. The only time in history the NRA fought against the right to bear arms. And so we see all of these different things on the timeline. And just to have this idea of when things are happening, there's usually multiple things, including not just the movement forward, but also some of the things that come and push back against us, as well as things that may not be indicatively thought of as part of a movement. The civil rights movement was about civil rights and equality and equity. And within that, we saw the Fair Housing Act as well as Housing and Urban Development Act. So while not something that folks said, oh, this is so that Black folks and people of color are treated, the same as everybody else, it still was part of that movement work and it came through, as well as the assassination of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Fred Hampton and Mark Clark from the Black Panther Party. So again, just some broad strokes about what it looks like and to compare it to some other movement timelines. I cannot emphasize enough that there was no possible way for me to fit on a screen all of the things that we've seen historically happening in Palestine. Many on this call have a great deal of knowledge of what that history looks like, but to give you just an idea of how it looks comparatively to other movement work. Again, only starting in 1917 and only going up to 2000, what we see here is that while the British was making a decision about who was disposable and whose land could be stolen, we also see that within that there was constant resistance and rebellion by Palestinians, as well as the role of the United States and its power in making decisions that influence the actions of Israel. So 1956, Dwight Eisenhower, one of our presidents, had made a call. And again, anytime you see a president's name from the United States on here, it was a time in history where they were making calls to Israel to say, hey, and I'm really overgeneralizing this, knock it off, or we're not going to give you any more aid. And it shows the influence power of the United States as a global power, and specifically its impact on Palestine. This all was happening, right? 1967, there were lots of things happening in the United States at that same time. So while there was a war, again, being waged in the occupation of Palestine, the UN, which the United States has a very significant role in, was making decisions for another country, just like they did back in 1917. While at the same time, in the United States, during that civil rights era, Malcolm X, Angela Davis, and other Black leaders were standing up and proclaiming that Palestine needed to be free. In Palestine, there was ongoing rebellion. It didn't stop. And this, again, is just the smallest of snapshots of what that timeline looks like. And then again, to compare it to what is framed as the Black Lives Matter timeline that really goes from 2000 through today. Again, this is the smallest of snapshots. It doesn't include everything, but gives you an idea of what it looks like during this cycle of movement work. Because while many folks remember the Black Lives Matter protests of 2013, they did not happen in a silo or just all of a sudden, because the bombing in Philadelphia in 1985 and Rodney King's very public beating in 1991 at the same time as the Iraq War and all of these other things were precursors to those events happening, that bubbling up of individuals who then culminated in a crisis that got global attention. And so, again, when we think about the cycles of movement work here in the United States, as well as the United States' role in the global society, we will start to see patterns of both resistance and pushback from the status quo. Before we move on, I do want to ask questions, comments, thoughts of all of that was just said. Feel free to either come on mic or to use the chat.
Hey, Jamaica. You mentioned something very important because a lot of people think like once you're engaged in advocacy, it's like this one way, like, path that once you achieve something, go celebrate and not worry about it, right? But something that you mentioned, which is very crucial, is the pushback, right? Um, can you kind of like, maybe elaborate a little bit more of the reality of that? Like how often does that happen, the pushback, right? So people can take this activism into more realistic, you know, um, reality than to just think, hey, we achieved it, we can go back to sleep. Now let's pick something else and not worry about what we have achieved. And even during the process, the pushback.
Absolutely. And I do see that someone else has their hand raised. Shawn, do you want to go ahead and field the what's it look like in real life when you win something and then there's pushback?
So the easy answer or response to that, Dr. Sahib, is that there's always pushback. No matter what gains we get, we always have opposition. And that's where the commitment comes in to continue the fight. We have our wins. We have some legislative wins that have been huge in the state. And as soon as those wins happen, the opposition is working to do their best to somehow either limit what we won or completely unravel it. And we can see that in our own elections today, right? Like we can see the conversation, we can see what happened with, big topics or issues like Roe versus Wade in this country, or we can see it in the ending of affirmative action. We could see it in, all the ways in which, this idea of being woke today has been adopted by right-wing opposition and to mean something entirely different. So we had an election here in the city of Schenectady that elected the most people of color ever in the city. We had 4 people of color on a 7-person council, and it was a great win in 2020, right, Jamaica? It was
We
2020.
won
Yeah,
21.
we won in
The second year
2020.
I was elected.
Yeah, exactly. You won your seat. We had seats in the county, the county legislature, and we had all the seats in the city council. And it was a great time to have a victory lap and to celebrate. And the opposition did everything they can to limit what those people could do in those positions of power. Right. So it is a constant fight. Have to celebrate your wins, but recognize that the pushback is always coming, especially when we're talking about issues related to culture, race, and more. So the pushback is constant, and that means that we always have to keep our eyes open and pay attention. If we're talking about on the legislative side of it, and we're getting folks elected to office, it's not just saying we won and just walking away. It's about making sure that that person that we wanted in remains committed to what we got them in there in the first place for. So it's a constant work and there's constant pressure. And I think that it too often, and in our country, in this country anyway, we have taken our foot off the gas, so to speak, and thinking that it's okay to allow this person in this space that won this seat to do their work and haven't paid attention. And that's why we end up losing many of the gains that we once had. It is not a given, right? That people do the right thing or what we feel is the right thing. It's not a given that because we got some legislation passed or this civil rights thing done, that it'll remain that way. There are always people seeking to go in the opposite direction and to oppose that. So it's important to stay diligent. And once again, I'm gonna keep using the word committed because it is that level of work. Now, I don't want to scare people into thinking that it's just always work, 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 and it's never a break in this. But it's important to understand the commitment, and that's why I'm making the emphasis about that. We do have the wins, we certainly do, and it's through the people that those wins happen. And as long as we stay committed and organized enough to address the things that happen in our community, we'll have more wins than losses.
And
Mhm.
before moving to the person who has their hand up, because I am going to ask you to come on mic, let us know your first name before you speak. Just some specific examples include the Climate Act, that once it was passed, not being able to maintain the pressure has meant that right now we do not have the funding that is necessary for the implementation. The same thing happened with Raise the Age, that we won Raise the Age that started to end the criminalization of children, but there wasn't the funding necessary for the full implementation of that program. So instead of children just not going to prison, it kicks the can so that they later are ending up in the justice system anyways. Locally in the city of Schenectady, through our work in 2020 and 2021, for the first time ever, there's a budget line that ensures that the entire police department is supposed to receive anti-racism training. Now, that's different than anti-bias. The fact that that language was included really was about our efforts to be in the face, in the streets, in the city council. What we haven't had is the accountability of what that looks like. Who did the training? Has every police officer and staff person received it? What does that look like? And the same thing happened with chokeholds. While we originally got them banned in the city of Schenectady, they then put them back inside their policy. So us being able to hold accountable as well as give support to our quote unquote champions once they are elected is also crucial. Um, the person who has their name hand up, if you could come on mic and let us know your name and then your question, comment, or concern.
Yes, good evening. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Khadija. Thank you so much for coming on to give us this talk. My question is, what challenges do you face when it comes to community engagement, sustained engagement, meaning if you start a cause, you want people to show up or be engaged, and then you're simultaneously having something else. How do you juggle and keep people with you?
I'm going to ask you to give us some grace. We're going to get to a section of this conversation that talks about how we connect with the community and what that looks like. And very much we're going to answer that question when we get there. So if you'll just give us some grace after we talk about some of the different ways that we impact the community, the next thing we talk about is community outreach and engagement, if that works for you.
Sure, thank you.
Awesome. Shawn, you want to go through this quickly or shall I?
I'm trying to see the screen. It's really small on my end for some reason.
Oh,
All right. So I see that these are different strategies of approach, direct serve of different strategies or work in the community. You have direct service, community development, you have advocacy, and you have organizing. The type of help for each charity or aid. So we have Sikkim on Albany Street, that's a food pantry, and you have other organizations that work with either furniture or clothes. Those are direct service types. Typically, I'm just staying on the top of direct service right now. Typically, for the direct service end of it, it's religious groups that are usually at the head of it. We have Catholic Charities in our area that runs much of our food support in the community. The role of the community recipient of services and assistance and impacts on problem is our immediate and short term, which is really, really different. And we are talking about advocacy or organizing. Organizing is about long-term solutions that address root causes. So if we're just feeding people, if we have a food pantry, that's great, and we need that. We should have that because that is absolutely a need. It is an acute problem, and people need food today. But why aren't we ensuring that people have food already? Like, why aren't we ensuring that people have the things they need? And like that's where the long term. So why are people hungry? Why are people having to show up at food pantries? What's the issue there, and how do we address it? That's a long term goal that addresses the root cause. Advocacy is the medium to long term. In some sense, there's a lot of overlap between that and organizing because we organize to advocate for people, right? We're looking to address certain things in the community. Advocacy can be about a major issue happening that's impacting the entire community, or it could be about something that's a little bit smaller and more personal and directly with you, and teaching folks how to advocate for themselves in any space that they are with our government or with some other organization. Um, Outcomes for each. I'm skipping through it. I hope everyone's following. If you're not, please say so, and I'll go through it a bit slower. But if you're looking at the outcomes, direct service, community development, advocacy, and organizing, immediate needs are met, and community development, more resources enter the community improvement occurs. Some people are left out. And we see that a lot of with the development plans from the city when they're picking and choosing how they're going to invest. A prime example of this is the Yates Village project, where they redeveloped that entire structure, had everybody move out with promises of being able to come back. And as was predicted by many, not everyone was able to get back to those new buildings, those new houses. And that's a part of community development. It doesn't always work for every single person, and some people are left out. Advocacy legislation is passed, community members participate, but do not learn the tools to make change. You learned how to advocate on a particular issue. Oftentimes, it's about the leaders doing most of the talking and bringing people with them to demonstrate their connection with the community and support for the community, but without the education, which is organizing, without educating people and creating more leaders in the community, that to me is medium and a short term thing that's addressed as opposed to the long-term goals of organizing. And as you see with outcomes for organizing, communities involved in decision making on a range of issues. What that means, it's a very short piece, but what that actually means is what I just said earlier. It's about creating an environment where your community feels like they can take the reins of leadership themselves, that they can advocate for themselves, that they have the tools on their own and in partnership and community with others to address the area of concern that they need to. Any questions about that, please feel free. I just didn't want to read every single piece of that. I just wanted to have a brief overview, and we can share this with you all as well.
absolutely. So this entire presentation will be shared as a PDF, and you all can review it on your own. Each of these pieces are necessary. Like that's really important. We're not in a space where we can just organize all of our problems away because we do have all of these other needs. And so everything that's on here, all of these strategies are necessary at this point. Our goal, if we were to reshape the entire world or even just our state, is to not need direct service anymore because we have organized our way to systemic and institutional change.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to ask the question, Jamaica and Shawn, and this probably could be more of like a personal answer coming from your end. A lot of people get excited when we have like food pantry. They show up once, they help, distribute the food, and go home feel all good about it, right? That's great. And every now and then, and I'm not taking away from that. I've volunteered myself, with food pantries or things in that nature. But I think the biggest thing is, how do we stay committed to organizing, right? Because that's the long term. Because now you're trying to change the structure that is causing us or leading us, just like Shawn mentioned earlier, to having these food pantries, right? So for you, Shawn, you mentioned commitment. Like, what keeps you committed, right? Because a lot of people, for instance, signed up to be volunteers with our organization, right? But the percentage of those who kind of like are coming back for these orientations, obviously, it's low, and I really applaud them for that. I'm sure others who are not here, I'm sure they have their reasons for that, but it's really the commitment. If you could really kind of like bring that to reality, is like, what does it mean to be committed? Like, what keeps you going? And this is something, Jamaica, you mentioned, and I'm not going to try to paraphrase it. It's like, if you're coming to help me something, and we're kicking rocks. It's like, if you're here for yourself. I'm
It's a
sure you guys
slide
remember
at
this.
the end.
Yeah, okay.
It's on the slide at the end. And Dr. Sahib, what you're asking is the same thing that Khadija asked, is about that engagement and that involvement and what that looks like. So if folks don't actually have a question more so about the direct service versus advocacy versus organizing, I do think we should try to move on and get to this other part, as well as if anyone ends up having questions or comments that you think of later, you can send us an email at untitledandfree@gmail.com, or let Dr. Sahib know. He will send me a message on WhatsApp, I'm sure. And we'd be able to, be able to share that additional information. But what you are speaking about is what is, as well as what was asked before, is about ways that we share information and connect with people. So I am going to ask for some participation from the audience on this one. In the chat, if you will, for those that are able, type what you believe are the different ways that you can either share information with people or connect with them. How do you engage with your community? What does that look like? Or what do you think that looks like? And take the time to drop it in the chat, or if someone wants to raise their hand or come on mic, and what are the ways that you talk to other people or think are ways to reach other folks. So I see a little bit in the chat, but if anyone again wants to come off, oh, look at Dr. Sahib, somebody said WhatsApp, your favorite. The person who raised their hand, you can go ahead and come on mic, say your first name.
This was Saul. It's nice to meet you, Jamaica. I was actually also going to say WhatsApp. I think, especially in the Muslim community, at least at the masjid or the mosque that I'm very active at, there are very large group chats that are how the mosque communicates to the community, and then through that, people also tend to send things to the secretary or any of the admins of the group chat to send things out, and it's hundreds of people in these group chats. So whenever it's something that you want to get out to the Muslim community, or at least the specific Muslim community at my mosque, that's typically how people do it. And then there's also subgroup chats. Like we have an all women's group chat. There's like a sisters business group chat. People, whenever they're trying to sell things or whenever they're trying to promote an event or their personal business or anything, they also tend to send flyers and messages in there. So WhatsApp is a big one. And then of course, social media, I think, of course.
Thank you for that. Someone else has said social media and WhatsApp. I engage with my community through social media, conversations, and trying to volunteer. Someone else said friends, family, personal network, business community groups, professional network. I'm going to give you the cheat sheet. And I'm going to explain this because it was one of the first things that I learned when I was learning about organizing, in ways that we communicate and connect. That connect is really, really important, right? Um, this, the way it's listed at the top of the chart where it says one-on-one home visits, door knocking, canvassing, that is the most effective way to communicate with your community and connect with them. The bottom of the list is the least effective way. And you could add WhatsApp, probably between news items and social media. Because the idea is how we're working collectively together, having a conversation, sharing of ideas and information. And while on social media, we may go back and forth in the comments, it's not the truest form of connection and conversation. As a matter of fact, it is often very detached. But when you are face to face with someone and you're having a conversation, or you're on the phone with them and you're able to talk to them in real time and answer questions, it is the most effective way to communicate and share information. All of these other ways are helpful. There's no question about it. But that one-on-one conversation when you're talking to someone is the most effective way, because not only are you able to answer their questions in real time, but being able to see someone's face, to be able to look them in the eye, to see their body language is a whole nother training that we do on canvassing, because there is a best practice for how to canvass and have conversations with folks. Active listening and all of those types of things is really, really important. And that level of engagement when you're talking to someone face to face allows you to be able to find out what their why is. Why do they want to be involved? As well as be able to consider what's going to engage them based on their skills, their knowledge, and their interests. So when someone says, oh, I'm a mom, I've got young kids at home, it's really hard for me to get out, but I do a lot of reading and I watch a lot of podcasts. You now are able to think about the work that is happening, how they can be plugged in, but also how you can help them learn and grow based on where they're at right now. When you put a flyer up on social media that may share about an event that's happening, it's a one-way piece of conversation. This thing is happening. Here's a limited amount of information. You will or won't come. There should also be a phone call and text messages and peer-to-peer conversations and all of those things that increase the amount of interest and answer any questions about why you should actually show up and what is going to happen. So this list has been so critical in the work that we do and that I've done for now 20 years, to be able to meet people where they're at, answer questions, find out what their interests are, and help them be engaged in a way that is meaningful to them, but also allows us to learn and grow collectively together. Did I miss anything, Shawn?
Absolutely not. You covered that really well. I think I would only maybe just getting to thinking about the one-on-one conversations and all the other pieces being supportive of that, is important. So yes, we can have the WhatsApp chat and we can share information in there. I love, the idea of being able to for information to move quickly. But once again, it's going back to this word commitment. And how do we get people committed? And getting people committed means showing up and having those conversations. People can be fooled into a false sense of like accomplishment by being on social media, raging in the comments, or liking, disliking, hating, whatever they're seeing. That's not affecting change. You're right. That's not really affecting change. That's responding to something. But to be clear, change happens on the granular level, and that's getting on the one-on-one conversations and getting people committed to the work and invested in the change that you all are looking at, whatever the issue is that you have a concern with. I'm putting emphasis on commitment for a reason, and I'm gonna probably say it 90 more times in this talk. We don't have that much time to go. It's really a lot to kind of talk about in an hour, but it's a really important part of this. Know your why. Why am I here? Why am I doing this work? What's my capacity and what's my role? And understand that all roles are important in this, no matter where you're at in that work.
And we're going to get to that. As a matter of fact, I almost want to skip ahead and go to roles and responsibilities and then come back to tactics and actions. Because when we're thinking about the different roles and responsibilities, it is another part of that engagement. Are people fulfilled with the work that they're doing? Do they have the support needed to do their work they're doing? Is there someone that's checking in? If there's a group of folks, say 10 people, say, hey, we're all going to make phone calls from 6 to 7 p.m. and we all have a list and you gave us a script and then, hey, go make these phone calls. Did you go over the script with everyone so that they're really comfortable and they know what they're talking about? Did you make the time to answer questions that they may have about the script? Did you make sure that they understood they don't have to have all of the answers? And like, the support of every volunteer will increase that level of engagement, and knowing that we are part of a collective work, that none of us is doing this in a silo all alone, but that we are part of a larger group that works collectively together. And there are so many different ways that folks can be involved. This is a short list. This isn't even the entire list, because translation and interpretation should be on every list, no matter where you are. We live in a global society. But this is some of the different ways that folks can be involved. Whether it's that you're actively going out and you're knocking doors, or you're handing out flyers, or you're stationed outside of the mosque that you've been assigned to for that week, to talk to attendees for whatever reason, or you're going to community events. That's one piece. Research is needed. Shawn talked about, the getting information and being educated. It also is how you educate the community. Making phone calls, fundraisers, creating graphics, because we all know social media is a real thing. It is a plus. It is still necessary and helpful. It's just not top of the list, but it is still important. Our social media presence, because we've had interns, made such a difference. It's been really wonderful and really great. That was necessary, as well as any other thing that you could think of in the ways that you show up that work collectively together, but ensuring that every person is supported in their role, has clear vision about what their responsibility is, and that folks are checking in with them. Hey, how did that phone bank go? Were there any really bad calls that you want to think about how you could have handled it differently? Were there really great calls? Was there anyone that you think maybe we should reach out to them again? Maybe they want to volunteer. It's so important. It's its own presentation and workshop about volunteer engagement and support that takes 90 minutes. So there is a math and a science, as well as an art, to all of the work that we do. And this is just a small snapshot.
Let me add something to that really, really briefly. It's also about tapping into the skills you already have, right? And when you're trying to figure out what your role can be in any given sit, not to say that it's always got to be the most comfortable thing you do, but tap into the skills you have. If you're a tech person who really is into graphics or really into messaging and that type of stuff on social media or whatever else, that's what you do. Really, you kind of have an affinity to that. Maybe that's your role. If you're a cook and you love to cook all the time and you love to cook, maybe that's your role. Maybe you're feeding the people that come to your group meetings, right? Whatever the skills you already have in your day-to-day life, always think about how you can leverage that in this work, because all this is, though we're talking about this in like community organizing in this really particular way, and like Jamaica said, this list is not, you know, this is a very short list about the things how you can contribute. Just recognize that you have skills already, you have talents already, you have things that you're good at already, and how can you look at what you already do and apply it to the work that's needed.
And because we are short on time, I do want to make sure that we touch on what are the different types of actions and tactics that anyone could look forward to doing when it comes to organizing work. And you'll see that there's overlap, right? We talked about social media. Do you know how to create graphics? Do you know how to create social media content? Because we need social media posts. The reason that action and tactics happen is because you have a target. You want to, Shawn mentioned this. You want to create change, you need to know who creates that change. Whether it's your city council member, it's your school board, whoever it is that has the power to create change. These are the ways that you are targeting them in a very public way that allows them to know we're building power of the people. Y'all need to do what we said.
Mhm.
And so, again, this short list isn't everything. It is a snapshot of some of the work that happens in organizing that doesn't even fully look at all of the things that happen behind the scenes every single day, because the movement doesn't stop. But when there are more of us, when there is all of us, we're able to keep that work going. Any questions before we get to what is Shawn's favorite slide? Lila Watson, shall you read it,
There
Shawn?
you
Yeah, this is absolutely one of my favorite quotes from Leela Watson, and the name is pronounced, "If you come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." The idea of just simply helping separates you from the people or the communities, as if you're in a, you know, in this other place and you're like, I just need to help this person. We're all connected, right? What's good for our, you know, what's good in our community benefits us all. So doing this work is about recognizing that connectedness, and not divorcing yourself from it or separating yourself from it at some distance. Because what happens then is that I'm willing to help today, but tomorrow, like I got other things to do, I'm not really interested. No, this is about our collective good, and that's something to keep at the forefront of your mind when you're thinking about, once again, that good old word commitment to the work that you're a part of.
And not that any of us is expected that we never take a break and that we never rest. The more of us there are, the easier the work is. There's this quote that I get wrong all of the time that speaks about a choir, and that when there's 100 people in the choir holding one note, when one person drops out, you don't notice because 99 other people are still holding that note. Then they come back in so that someone else can take a break. So the more people that we're able to build in this work and work collectively with, it's called base building, and it's literally you're building a base of people who are doing the work in all of these different ways and for all of these different reasons. But we have that commonality of struggle that we're willing to fight for change, because when we don't, change doesn't happen. But the more of us that are involved, then we take our breaks. Damani Farley says, a few of us have to do a lot until a lot of us can do a little.
That's a great quote from Damani. Damani's our city councilman here in the city of Schenectady. He's a really terrific brother. I want to. I think we should, because we asked about questions, and I wanted. I'm not sure that we answered Khadijah's question about like how do you maintain or that community support, right? What does it look like? Maybe we did, I think, indirectly in some ways when we're talking about the one-on-one conversations, commitment, and Khadija, I would say like that's the other part of it besides just showing up at the door and having the in-person conversations is being consistent. You have to be consistent. One of the reasons why our communities aren't organized well is that, there's not a consistent presence, where the community feels the trust necessary. Like we know these people are going to be here. We know that this thing is going on. And too often, you'll have organizations or you have people running campaigns showing up during the election season, right, to say a thing, and we're going to do this and we want to do that, and then you don't see them again until the following election season, right? It's very inconsistent in the approach throughout the year, except for the consistency only showing up on election time. So we want to show up in our communities and have these conversations and just be a constant presence. I hope that answers your question. If you have any other question about that, please feel free to ask.
We do have a little bit more time. I apologize if it felt a little rushed. We wanted to try to provide as much information as possible in a little chunk of time. Like Shawn said, an hour is not that long at all. But if other folks right now have questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, please either put them in the chat or come on mic, raise your hand, any of those things, because we do have a good group of folks with us. I saw how many people are on. I can't imagine that only 2 or 3 people had something they were thinking about, and I'm okay with awkward silence.
I will let
I
them
have a
ask.
question.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah. So when it comes to any advocacy, any work where you're helping people, how do you maintain your mental health and your burnout that you can feel from helping people? Where is the balance that you find the equal, I don't know what the word is, the equal like balance of it all?
It's a really good question. Thank you. Thank you, Brittany. So I think it's personal to each person involved in the work. But being intentional about your breaks, like being intentional about, once again, I said this earlier about your capacity. Like how much am I taking on in this moment? Like how much, and then how is it impacting me? So that the intentionality around that is extremely important because it's very easy to get caught up, like knowing you're doing a good thing and feeling good about the work you're doing and feeling the urgency and the need to do it is a very powerful motivator. And it speaks once again to like understanding your commitment to it. It's not just something, it's not work to you. It's like, I want to do this because I know this is important and it's helping people and it's helping me and all of that. And it's great to have that. But it's also on the flip side of that, can be harmful if you're not intentional about taking the breaks that you need and having some joy, right? Enjoying, understanding that there's joy in this as well. So that would be my response to it. And I see you in the chat, Mohammed. You have to go. Thank you for being here. It's just, yeah. So that's my response. Jamaica, what do you got? What do you say?
Yes, and along with the balance and being able to recognize when you have, been putting too much of yourself out there, right? You cannot pour from an empty cup. It also is about that self-care is about the collective. It's collective care. So you caring for yourself, others caring for you, you caring for other people. When we truly build collectively and have a community, how are we leaning on each other and recognizing the need for support that others have, and recognizing when we need support and being in a community where you can ask for it, that you feel comfortable to say to your sisters, listen, I really want to be able to go to this next event, but I feel like I'm just really spent right now and I kind of need some help. Can you help me? And whatever that help looks like, whether it's you want to sit down and have a cup of tea to decompress, or just to be able to say out loud, I want to be there, but I think it's going to take too much from me to go, and then I won't be able to do anything else. Because none of us can be at everything all of the time. but all of us can be at something some of the time, and it's okay. But really being aware of the community that surrounds you, being able to lean on each other, and knowing it's okay to ask for help, and you're not going to be ostracized because you didn't show up to the last protest.
Yeah, that's right. And there's no perfect science to this. I mean, this is life. And life is, both beautiful and ugly at the same time. And the work is a reflection of that. I hate the idea of work-life balance. It's life, period. It's life. Work is part of life. Um, this movement work and like addressing things in your community, if you're committed to it, will become a part of your life. And it's important to understand that no perfect science, and it can be very personal. I love what you said, Jamaica, about just recognizing the community that you're in. And because that's extremely important, having the right kind of circle and people around you, as you're, delving into these like really serious, emotionally tasking like issues in our community.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? You're welcome. Any other questions before Dr. Sahib jumps in, because he always has something? It's a
I have a
good thing.
question.
You know,
Yes.
Hi, Shawn and Jamaica. My name is Nur Jahan. So, my question was like, how should we deal with things like I'm in healthcare, right? And like when the whole Black Lives Matter was going on a lot, and like places were getting looted and all those things were happening, and this whole thing happening with Gaza out right now, like how do I deal with sticking to like what I believe in, sticking up for what I believe in, but like not dealing with like the backlash from, how do I deal with all the backlash like from my coworkers, from the place I work, or like even higher up, not like, basically helping me out with the situations. So right now I'm okay because I'm going to a new job, but I'm just trying to prepare myself at the new place how to handle myself, because I believe that I need to say and stick up for what I believe in.
Mhm.
But at the same
Mm.
time, how do I like what do I do to like deal with these kind of issues with my coworkers and being involved in these kind of things? So
Jamaica?
Oh, you mean because I've had to
Yeah.
deal with it very directly and being fired for being me? Um, it is a risk. Like there's no way to sugarcoat it. Um, I think the ways that some of the things that I learned in doing this work when it comes to having a job, and we all need to pay our bills and take care of our families and take care of ourselves. Um, there are a couple things, and it's being aware of what are the policies and practices of your job, what are your rights, knowing your rights in the workplace as well as your rights just overall. So that you're able to, if you need to speak to HR, how are you advocating for yourself when you talk to HR? Again, it's a whole nother workshop about self-advocacy, whether it's with your job or public schools or your own personal health. Being able to know your rights and to advocate for yourself, and also recognizing that there is a risk. New York is an at-will state. Um, if you're in a union, you have additional protections, but workers' rights are challenged all of the time. And because it's an at-will state, depending on your position, you can be fired for absolutely no reason. You just cannot be fired for protected reasons. And knowing that and understanding the language that you use or that your employer uses is that safety net for you, but it's not 100%. I would also suggest looking for allies and accomplices at your job. Are there people that you know who have the same ideas about justice and freedom and liberation that you do? Have yourself a community inside your work so that you know where you can turn to. Here comes Roman. Shawn can add the rest.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and I'm glad. I wanted Jamaica to speak to that first, just because of her very real lived experience going through that. And I think she answered it wonderfully. I think I'll add, um, beyond like what we've seen with there's real examples right now of people losing their jobs around, advocating for, free Palestine, right? To end the atrocities that are happening in Israel today. People have lost their job, people have lost work, people have lost contracts, around it. And the world isn't fair. It sucks that that's the case, but we live under a very oppressive regime in many instances. But there are opportunities that we have, and this is where coming to the community is so important. Getting the community involved and finding people that are of like mind, because that will insulate you a bit, from from what's happening with the systemic oppression of speech, of thinking, of thought, of ideas. The day that we can, like, I'm riffing a little bit, going on a little bit of a tangent, but I can just remember the backlash of simply calling what we're seeing in Palestine, a genocide, and saying it was wrong, and addressing the government, and how the how many people came out in force and called us anti-Semitic and Jew haters, and all of that. It was a lot of backlash. Um, but it's absurd. It's absurd. And we were willing to take the risk. We knew what was coming. I don't think I never believed that this, for some time I didn't think it would go on for this long. But it's, to Jamaica's point, it is a risk. You need to know your surroundings. So going back to the 6 steps that I talked about earlier, and the gathering information. So you're walking into this new place, be observant, listen, pay attention to what's happening, have some conversations. Don't just put yourself out there in these spaces. Gather the information, be educated about the choices that you're making, the people that you're talking to, and keep your circle tight. um I love that you're like, how do I, remain true to myself, right? How do I remain true to myself? You should do that. We all do that here, but it is a risk in spaces. So I would be strategic about my relationships and my approach. And I would continue to do that work. And I would find a space that's accepting of that spirit, right? And there are spaces like that. I work with an organization in the Hudson Valley that's a part of Bard College, who's accepting of these ideas and progress. We are very aligned in how I think about the world. And so that's important to find. And I'm really lucky to have been able to find that. It makes life a lot, more easy for me. But so in a space where I'm not sure what that looks like, and it might be hostile to that, I need to know my surroundings and know the people around me.
Additionally, that there's probably more people who agree with you and just haven't been brave enough to
Yeah.
speak up.
Yeah.
Um, but again, moving with caution, when I ran for reelection, I was quite boldly told I would not be reelected because I supported Palestine
That's a great example.
and
Yeah.
because I spoke against the state of Israel. I was absolutely told, if you do this, Jamaica, you're not going to be reelected. I was unapologetic and I was reelected.
Right. Right. That's right. And that's because we had a community that supported, we were of like mind and supported, Jamaica's campaign, and that was extremely important.
And that included Dr. Sahib and Imam Jamal,
Right.
and Fatima and some amazing folks from the Muslim community, that supported me in ways that, to this day, like for the rest of my life, I'm going to appreciate. And it was about building intersectionality and collective struggle, that we now are going to have forever. We have time for one more question before I ask Dr. Sahib for closing thoughts. Okay, Dr. Sahib, closing thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. It's again, thank you so much. An honor to really continue to work with you guys. Not just, this is just one small part, and this is also a message for our volunteers. Jamaica and Shawn are our best allies. Palestine brought us together. Will keep us together. We'll continue to do this work. We really appreciate you guys. And yeah, thank you. I really can't put it into words. You guys know how we feel about you, myself and Mam Jamal. The bonding that we have, because the cause is what brought us together, and that's what's going to keep us together. Thank you so much. Obviously, this is one of many workshops that we'll be doing for our community at large, not just our volunteers. And we'll continue to work together. For our volunteers, please, check out the website, check out the social media platforms. You guys have was it Friday still?
It is. We still do Focus
Please,
Fridays. It's at 7 p.m. now, and it's on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So if you go to Untitled and Free on Facebook or Instagram, or All of Us Untitled and Free on YouTube.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys.
And thank you, Dr. Sahib. The feeling is mutual. And thank you, everyone, for joining.
Very much appreciated and glad
Thank
to
you
be
so
able to.
much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jamaica, I think you have the recording then.
I do.